Welcome, listeners and viewers, to the next episode of Welcome to Perth Catch Ups. I have Kevin Cooper here from Sea Containers WA, and we'll actually call him an entrepreneur because he's just sold a business with another business partner recently, and he's got a few other fingers in a few other pies, which we'll get into. But hello, mate. How are you?
Good, Krabby. Yourself?
I'm going well.
Good.
We've been having good chats off camera, so it's nice to get you onto camera and talk about your story. So,
Thank you.
Give us your. Let's go for this. I probably should have given you a little bit of a warning beforehand, but give us your biggest business highlight in your life so far.
Whew. Wow. Oh, well, okay. Probably the sale of the business.
Yep.
So my business partner, Greg, he and I started a transport company 20 years ago. I was still working in the corporate world back then. So Greg ran that show, and we successfully sold that company in February last year. So I sold it for a tidy sum to a global company. And at that point, that business had 45 trucks, a couple hundred trailers, 10,000 square metre warehouse distribution business, a couple of container parks down at Rouse Head. It was one of the top 3 or 4 players in the containerised transport game in WA. So that's really when you... And I was a director / 50% shareholder. From a business perspective, Greg and I are good mates at the same time, great business partners. And I think, so I'm claiming that win as well.
Yeah,
it was all Greg's work. But,
well done, Greg, if you're listening or watching.
Thank you, Greg. But so that's probably the biggest one.
I love that you're self-taught. So everything you've done, you've had to go out and learn yourself. But give us one of your biggest low points in business as well. A lot of people will talk about the best moments in being a self-employed person.
One of the hardest things, mate, I suppose, is deciding to walk away from a very strong career path. Coming back home to Australia in 2008 to work alongside Greg, but then to move out and set up my own operation with Greg as a business partner. It's difficult actually having 2 business partners in the one, 2 owners in the one business. So we decided relatively early that I would do something different, and we had to actually, there's a couple of reasons behind that. One was that we actually had another business on the side, which was a diesel workshop, and that was just ticking along, and one of us had to get involved in that. And the transport company was Greg's baby. So I stepped aside after about 6 months, moved into the diesel workshop and spent 8-9 months in that, tuning it up, putting a management brain through it, elevating that business and elevating the guy that was running it for us. And at the same time as that, I started Sea Containers WA. But then not long after, the GFC came. So I suppose that was quite a scary moment. And to go from leaving a strong career path, strong career, taking that big risky step to go out on your own and come back home, and then not long after have to face a GFC and a whole bunch of question marks around that was probably the hardest at a young age, and when not knowing as much as I thought I knew either.
And you started, your direction in life has pivoted a couple times, but you started a lot earlier than probably most. So you were growing up as a kid into your sport, just getting through year 12, just by the skin of your teeth.
Scraping through. Well, after failing to become a police officer because I was too short at 17, I was wanting to get in as a cadet, and back then there was a height restriction. And now you look at me, I'm 6 foot 1.5, so I was a late bloomer, you might say. But thankfully, I think on one hand, I've dodged that bullet, not becoming a copper. But then, scraped through year 12, just got enough to get accepted into uni, was going to be a primary school teacher. But then after kind of 2 or 3 months at the end of school waiting for the next year to start, I had a few mates earning money, and I decided I'd just maybe defer for a year or so and applied for a job as an accounts clerk in a shipping company in Fremantle. And this is back in 1987. So I was successful. And so I started on the 9th of March, actually. I'll never forget that date. In 87, caught the bus into Freo and started in this 80-year-old shipping agency.
Yep.
And that I fell into the international shipping business industry.
So you worked your way up from there. So wasn't a confident young man?
No, when I first started, I just didn't really know what I was doing. And back then there was 45, 50 staff in that business. a lot of old boys. Some have been there kind of 40 odd years. An old shipping agency, and spent the first 6 weeks in the accounts department, moved into import-export documentation through customer service. Actually went to TAFE at about 19 and did an import and export diploma with a couple of boys. But I think we spent, this a couple of boys from work, we spent more time mucking around than actually studying. But at the same time,
going to the pub, I imagine, as well.
Yes, not as much time on the books as we should have, but that was good fun. But I was always dedicated and focused at work whilst I was at work. And that was recognised. I remember my old boss used to say, "Kevin, you've got a lot of potential." And there's an old Asian guy there at work, Paul, used to call me a potential man. You have potential. So anyway, that was when I was probably 19 or 20. And
started chatting to different people from different countries as
that was the interesting
ships
part.
are coming in.
As I fell into that industry and I moved into customer service and then effectively dealing with the principals overseas. So one of the main agencies was K-Line, which is a Japanese shipping company. We were the agents for K-Line and also the agents for A&L, the Australian National Line, and dealing with guys in Japan and then dealing with customers that are exporting cargo to Japan and learning geography and ports in foreign countries and dealing with people exporting wool or grains or mineral sands, and at the same time dealing with importers importing furniture or a whole raft of products. And one phone call, you're on the phone to somebody exporting crayfish, and the next phone call you're on the phone to somebody who's importing desks from Thailand. And it was just interesting, very diverse.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate, and also a fun atmosphere. A lot of young guys there, growing up in the business as well, in the heart of Fremantle. So it was a great place to work, and that was the first 7 years of my life was working for that particular company.
So you'd be able to knock off work and then go down to Little Creatures, or
that didn't exist back then.
What was your local watering hole?
Little Creatures back then was actually a crocodile park.
Oh, really?
Yep, it was. But it used to be next door. We were on College Street, so next door was actually the Esplanade Hotel, which is now has been extended.
Yeah.
So it used to be a place called Club Frio's, was right next door, part of the Esplanade Hotel.
Yeah.
And then from there you might head across the Esplanade Park, and that would take you to Christie's, it was called, which is the old Black Swan deck.
Right.
Yep. So or maybe
early mornings there, late nights, early mornings.
Well and truly. And even in those days, mate, you also had the raunchies, which don't exist anymore.
Yep.
That used to be the Friday night for a few laughs.
And so all the boys from the fort would come across.
Yep. Yeah, it's all the guys in the shipping industry.
Yeah. So, I imagine you've seen Freo change a lot over those years.
It definitely has. I've effectively spent really the first 20 years of my career working in Fremantle. Some of it's changed, some of it hasn't, I think. It's always been a diverse culture. Quite interesting, the people that are in Fremantle. It's always nice to go for a walk uptown at lunchtime and have a bit of a look around what's going on.
People watch. So as you're watching cray fishermen, coming in and importing, exporting, were you picking up what business models seem to work and what things exporting and importing were better margins or better money makers?
Not back then, mate. No, back then I wasn't really thinking about that. I was actually more interested in my career and where I was going. Wanting one day maybe to effectively probably be a senior manager is what I was thinking. That was my career, was in the shipping industry.
Working your way up in that company?
Working my way up, through that company, and or then moving into other competitors in the industry and looking to maybe move overseas at some point in time. That was my initial goal. So that's in my early 20s. Probably in my later 20s, as I started doing a master's degree, I was actually doing it at that time with my now business partner, Greg. So he and I first met in the shipping industry and both started doing our master's degrees together. And actually, when we were doing the MBAs is when we used to challenge ourselves every week to come up with one business idea each by 7 o'clock on a Saturday night. And we still have that document with 30 different business ideas.
And you had to share it with each other?
Correct. Yeah. And if you didn't, then you had to buy the other couple was dinner. So that was the plan. So over the course of that time, we actually came up with 30 different business ideas. It's quite amazing when you put yourself under pressure and you have to come up with an idea.
With a deadline?
With what you do find.
And I imagine then that got you more and more creative.
It did, and some of those have come to fruition, not through us though. One of them was back then there was no doggy washers, and we had the idea of mobile doggy washers, or even putting them alongside car washers. That's happened. Care packs to be sent around the world to travellers. Some off-the-wall stuff as well.
Need to bring that back out again. Post that online.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
but at the age of mid-20s though, before you did the MBA, you got headhunted to then present over east.
I did. I got I got
Which
headhunted to go and work
would be
for
rare
another.
for a
Well, I
25-year-old.
got headhunted to go and work for another international shipping company, moving into a senior role as their sales manager, which within about 6 or 9 months became their regional manager. But when I first joined them, they asked me to go and present at this conference that was being held in the Hunter Valley. And every year this particular company would host the presidents around the world of the company. So there'd be 15 or 20 senior global executives would fly in, and I was asked to present to these guys that happened to be doing it in Australia this year. And I was a new manager in the country. So I flew to Sydney and I was asked to do a 15-minute presentation on the opportunities and potential for this company in WA for the next 3 to 5 years. And I hadn't presented since I was at school. So that was a little bit of a panicky moment, and I remember doing it and just thinking, oh, my voice sounds so nervous, and I'm doing a shit job. And that was a bit of a turning point for me actually, because I felt I did a very poor job. Despite 2 or 3 of them coming up and telling me how great I did, I didn't feel I did very well.
And so, did that self-belief, where did the self-belief start to come from that moment onwards?
Well, it's actually a little bit personal, that, because from there I actually did tell myself that I would not get stuck in that moment again where I can't present. So at first I did actually read a lot about how to present and how to improve your presentation skills. But I actually at the time didn't realise this, but a mate of mine who had recently been divorced, he introduced me to a therapist. You didn't call him a therapist back then. It was just, mate, Kev, come and see this guy with me, we'll have a bit of a chat. And he introduced me to this gentleman, and we spoke for a while. He ended up sitting me down and asked me to write some affirmations. And one of the affirmations that I still remember was, I no longer care what other people think, say, do, know, feel or act towards me, for I now love and approve of myself. And so effectively it was all about love and approval of yourself. Mm-hmm. And I've never forgotten that. And I would go there and write this affirmation like hundreds of times. And I did that for a good few months. And it's really about just changing the way you think.
Yep.
And mate, it was quite a changing moment.
Your mindset and how you view yourself is much more important than how anyone in that presentation is going to
Definitely, I was almost more concerned what others thought of me rather than actually what I was doing at the time in that conversation, whatever it might have been. So I kind of learned not to not care what people thought of me, but not to put so much weight on that.
It's overbearing.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, isn't it, for early 20s and, I mean, I guess people in general, but certainly as you're going to your late teens and early 20s, you do just value and probably put too much value on what other people think of you.
Well, you do. It's funny, even now in this business today, every month we do an Employee of the Month award. But through that, each individual employee votes for somebody. And then out of the hat, we pull 5 names out and they become the jury. So those 5 staff that month will read all the commentary that's been put down by people, and they will select who they believe is the winner for the month. That might be because someone's received 3 or 4 votes, or it might be because they've received an outstanding one. And then each of those people then have to stand up and actually read their favourite one. But they don't realise that they're actually presenting. And it's amazing seeing some of these blue collar boys, the welders, the guys on the workshop, or just yard guys that wouldn't even, if you asked them to present, they would shit themselves. But they don't realise they're actually standing in front of 25 people presenting. So, it's interesting.
No, I love it. How did you come up with that? I know you're an avid podcast
I am.
listener.
It was just, I know, mate. That's just one of the ones that came out of the blue. I do love my podcast for sure. I'm all about self-development and growth and taking personal responsibility for your own growth and development beyond just your innate skills that you may have. I'm not sure where it particularly came from. Yeah. But
so a mindset of not blame shifting. So taking ownership of when things go wrong in your business and personal life and working out how you can fix them?
I think in every respect, definitely. I mean, people, too often they look outside to blame people for things that don't go well. Yeah, so they say, well, get out of bed and take the oar, which is one of the sayings. I think the get out of bed, which is blame, denial, I can't remember what the E one is, whereas they should be, the oar is effectively ownership, accountability, responsibility. And too many people want to blame others for their situation and where they are, rather than what can they do about changing it themselves.
Because I guess that's the easier option at the time, but long term, it's the...
Yeah. If you're genuine, if you're genuinely honest with yourself, it's up to you. If it has to be, it's up to me kind of thing.
I do like that saying. That's a cracker.
Yeah.
In our first conversation, we brought that one up. So from 25, you've then presented...
At 25, joined Wilhelmsen, spent 3 years for them getting involved. And they are the world's leader in moving out of gauge, break bulk, big pieces of cargo, whether they be combine harvesters, big D9 trucks, so like floating car parks. So it was kind of 3 years running WA Northern Territory for them, and then they wanted me to go overseas. Pretty much at any one time they had 4 or 5 guys, expats living in America, Europe, so I had the option to go and do that. So they wanted me to go to Sydney, be national sales manager for 6 months, and then choose whether I want to go overseas. But we hadn't started a family at that point, so I'm probably 27, 28 at this point. So my wife and I decided we'd stay in WA. We didn't want to move. But it's funny, again, the universe, what it delivers. That particular week when they were asking me to make a decision, I had a call. Again, I was approached from MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company. They're the second largest shipping line in the world. They approached me to join their West Australian team as their sales manager here, come their 2IC in WA. So I decided to take that role, step back into containerised shipping, and stayed in Western Australia.
And then obviously did well in that position, worked your way, and then...
Did well there, yep.
What took you to New Zealand?
Well, MSC had 21 staff when I joined them in 97, and there's a lot was happening back then in the corporate world, and particularly computerisation was really kicking off and changing the way work was done. So MSC decided to centralise all their backroom functions to Western Australia. So we quite quickly, in 99, 2000, went from 21 staff to 80 staff. And among there, we employed a lot of young people. That's where I met young Glenn Austin, actually. So Glenn came on board probably then as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old. I was 29, 30 by this point. So yeah, met Glenn for the first time and worked alongside Glenn. He was one of the young guys, and if I can maybe tell a story or two about Glenn back then.
Yeah, I'll allow it. So you do a bit of mentoring of him and a few other people you've met along your path.
Yeah, well, there was at that time there was 80 people then in the business, and a lot of young guys coming through. And I took a bit of a shine at Glenn because he used to get in a bit of trouble on the weekend, and it wasn't uncommon for him to come in on the weekend with a black eye or a little bit of a fat lip, and he'd been getting up to mischief. And that's when he decided, actually, we had a few conversations, and I wasn't the impetus for it, but I know he'd been kind of sniffing around the boxing rings and decided he'd start training. And so it was actually quite good. I watched Glenn start his boxing career, start his training, and talk a lot about actually the hard training he used to do. And I think it really shaped Glenn in his future. And I used to actually quite enjoy following Glenn, going and watching his amateur fights. You know, on a Friday night, I'd head up to Kingsway Olympic and up that way, or Kingsway, and 40, 50 k's away, and go and watch Glenn fight. And just a bit of support. Be there, support him, and then have a chat about it back at work, and watch Glenn grow through the business and grow as a person as well. And always then sort of developed a relationship with Glenn and became a mate. And then basically for me in 2003, MSC approached me to go to New Zealand as the country manager. And that was a very interesting time because the gentleman that was the current general manager was demoted from GM of the country to North Island manager. He'd been there for 10 years in that role.
Wasn't developing,
he wasn't
growing.
The company was losing money over there, so I actually was...
So it was a sinking ship.
It was, mate, to pardon the pun. And so I moved to NZ, and back then I had twin girls by this point. They were 2.5, my son was 4. And my wife, who's been the rock in everything I do, she was just, yep, sweetie, if you want to go, let's go.
Supported you.
So yeah, massively, mate.
That's big. Considering there's twins and there's a 4-year-old. And
I was living a very busy life. I'd been doing the masters. I was travelling with MSC a hell of a lot. We had the twins. Xavier was 17 months when the twins came along, so we had a very, very busy period of time there. Em had given up her own career, and she just supported me all through what I wanted to do. And then we both upped and moved the family to NZ and didn't know a soul, but wanted to take that role. And went to New Zealand, fell into what was a tough role with not just the guy being demoted, but also the other 2 senior managers there that reported to me, both a good 15, 20 years older than me.
So the culture was
mate,
difficult to try to shape that when you're telling people that are 15 years older and we're now going to do this.
Correct.
What you've been doing is wrong.
Yep. Well, not necessarily wrong, but I wanted their respect, but also knew I had to earn their respect as well. And here I am, 30 years of age, flying into New Zealand. It's quite interesting actually when they have a much bigger issue with Australia than Australians have with the Kiwis. It's sort of a little brother, big brother.
There is a chip on the shoulder, isn't there?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. But we went there, turned it around. It became a fantastic success for MSC, and we took it from 40 staff to, I think, about 75 when I left 4 years later. And very happy with the way it turned around, and learned a hell of a lot as well. I had 7 direct managers in New Zealand, and that's probably where I really earned my stripes on managing people and learning kind of what does and doesn't work.
And by letting people have autonomy and giving people more responsibility.
That was very important, giving them the resources, not micromanaging what they do, giving them the freedom to make decisions as well. Autonomy, resources, winding them up, letting them go, and then touching base along the way and getting involved if I needed to get involved, step in, help out where I can, whether that mean managing, securing more resources, whatever it might have been, whatever was required to help them get back on track again, and then step back out again. But also along the way, giving them KPIs and incentives and encouraging them to be successful, but giving them what they need to be successful.
Did you find that worked with all people, or others need more personalised or a different approach?
Mate, I think there can be some overarching frameworks that you put in place, but everyone's an individual. They're all different too. Even now, I know that you can give somebody a destination. I want you to do this job, and some are like, "Cool, let me work out how to get there. I'll give you what you need." Others are like, "Well, what are the 10 steps you want me to get there?" And spell out those 10 steps, please, and they'll do it to the letter.
Follow the process.
Whereas others are much more, "Please, I'd just rather you tell me how to get there and leave me alone to do it."
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to try and assess personalities and how people work.
And so, obviously, the company would have been very happy with how New Zealand is then tracking.
They were.
That's obviously going back to the very beginning of our chat. That's where the big decision, the fork in the road moment.
It was. So that was, as I say, it was 2007. I was very busy growing the company very well. We had a 12-acre property in New Zealand, so living a fantastic life. Kids were loving it. My wife was loving it. She made a bunch of friends. We'd seen so much of the country. It's an amazing country to see as well. Just absolutely fell in love with the country. And my wife particularly thinks she must have been a Kiwi in a past life. Absolutely loved it. And we were quite amazed how many Kiwis were coming to Australia and not too many going the other way, because we just were blown away with such a beautiful country. The people are fantastic, the food's fantastic, the topography is just amazing. But I was very busy. The last 12 months I was in New Zealand. I was on a plane every 9 days travelling somewhere. We had 4 offices around the country. There's 11 ports in New Zealand, so I was very busy within New Zealand travelling. And at the same time,
before Zoom, so you couldn't just get on a Zoom and check in with
Didn't
people.
Exist. No, they wanted you front and centre. So I got to the point where I was kind of having to go I was based in Christchurch, up to Auckland, and I get the first plane in the morning, and then the latest one in the afternoon I can get to make sure I'm home in time to see the kids before they go to bed. And that just wasn't the right thing to be doing. I was just too busy. And actually, unfortunately, my eldest brother passed away from cancer in the February of 2007, and that was all part of it as well. He hadn't been well. And I was successful, and I had a very strong career path ahead of me. At the same time, I had started this small business with Greg back in WA. At some point, thought I might come back and get involved. On the other hand, I'm living this awesome life. The family are as well. I'm a young guy, I'm driving the X5, I'm getting paid very well. Massive global opportunities for me to keep growing within that business. But I was a hard worker, still am. But back then when I worked for somebody else, I worked very hard, and they expect you to work hard too. They rewarded you very well, but they expect you to work very hard.
So was it a lifestyle decision? Do you feel like you would have burnt out if you continued doing that role?
I reckon I would have,
And then growing?
I think, and even I think about my relationship, if it would have survived. We had a very strong, and still do have a very strong relationship. We were married 28 years. But you can't keep doing that, I don't think. Not
that
push
amount of
yourself
travel.
that hard, that much travel.
Not see the family as much as...
and the further up the tree you go, and I was very conscious. And part of the decision too, I looked at my son. At that point, he was 6.5, 7. I thought, you're actually halfway through your life, halfway through your childhood. By the time you're 14, 15, you're going to be off with your mates doing your own thing.
Don't want to chat to the parents at that point.
No, exactly.
My dad's not cool.
No, that's what I thought, mate. I was like, so that struck me as well. And I didn't want to not be there for my kids. So I pulled the pin. And much to the surprise of a lot of people, because I was a bit of a golden-haired boy, and they all had big plans for me. And I pulled the pin and came home to WA in the Easter of 2007.
And so the markets everywhere were going very well at that point, and then all of a sudden...
Well, they were, and I came home and bought a little $3,000 Mazda 323 and joined Greg in the transport company, working as a fleet controller in the demountable, getting there at 6 o'clock in the morning, kind of learning and understanding this business that I had an interest in. And then 6 months in, I stepped into the diesel workshop that we had, put a bit of a management brain through that. Greg was running the transport company day to day, and I was involved in the diesel workshop. And at the same time, on the side, we had a container park. I had access to containers from my shipping line experience and my contacts. So we decided I'd start a sea container business, selling and hiring shipping containers and using our transport company for the deliveries. So kicked that business off in May 2008. Started off nicely, just selling one or two here and there. And back in those days, there was very little internet really of note. But I did start Sea Containers WA and called it that with the internet in mind. Because for then it was Google search words were important. But also advertising in the Sunday Times. That was my prime source, was Sunday Times.
And that's where you were getting your referrals?
Yep, getting the business with Sunday Times. So that kicked off, and then the GFC came. And the GFC taught me a lot of lessons. We did well during the GFC, but I had to work extremely hard on the supply front, because back then shipping companies were all losing money hand over fist. They couldn't afford to buy new containers, because ordinarily they'd buy new containers and then siphon off or sell their second-hand boxes after 12, 13 years. But they didn't have the capital to be buying new boxes, so they extended the life of their second-hand boxes and basically were hanging on to them for 15, 16 years. So my entire supply chain dried up. And I learned very quickly that without supply, you don't have sales.
Yep.
So I did a lot of travel, actually back again, travelling to Southeast Asia, and correct, East Coast, and just doing whatever I could to buy boxes overseas, which was great, because I did develop some great long-term relationships.
And have you been able to lean on them with COVID?
Over the years,
now?
definitely. So kind of now I'm 13 years in, built some great relationships, got ourselves through the GFC, and did very well, and then the business grew from strength to strength.
Because you made it a lean machine during
I was
that
just
GFC
conscious,
period?
and I was constantly learning too. And by this point, because I came home after 20 years thinking that I knew a thing or two about business, but I knew nothing, really. When you work for yourself, that's when you truly know. That's when you really learn, I think. I didn't have the support network. When I was a previous manager, I had a PA, had all these workers for me. But when you're doing everything yourself from scratch, you have to learn pretty quickly.
Yep, the whole process, the legal, the HR, the
There's so
accountancy.
much, mate. Operations, finance, sales, marketing, processes, systems, people. So there's a lot to learn.
And try not to get bogged down in one particular...
No, exactly. You've got to be agile. There's a lot to learn when you are running your own company. And I had Greg as a business partner, so we both went into the sea container business 50-50 as well. So I had that great support of him, and we always bounced stuff off each other. So we're still great business partners. So that's worked out very well for us. So pretty much the business went well. And then in 2012, I started up Sea Containers New Zealand. So I had my previous sales manager that worked for me in NZ. We maintained a friendship after I left, and I used to go back on a regular basis just for a holiday, and also a little bit of duck shooting and catch up with the boys. And that morphed into, we set up Sea Containers New Zealand.
Working out how can this become a work trip?
Yeah, I didn't say that. Very much so, mate. So that resulted in a couple of times a year heading across to NZ, and that's
tough to have to go over there.
It has to be done.
Just check in on, make sure the business is operating well.
Yep. So
that business has been going well since 2012?
It's gone very well, actually. Yeah, New Zealand's gone very well. It's actually morphed into now we also sell in 9 Pacific islands as well. So throughout the Pacific, NZ's done exceptionally well. Haddon, my business partner, has done a great job. And we have a GM that runs that company, very experienced guy, who's awesome. Again, an awesome network, awesome team over there. Just recently sold actually a minor share to a couple of the senior guys in New Zealand.
Awesome.
So they're really happy. The business is going exceptionally well.
Yeah.
Couldn't be happier.
And is it complicated though, those different islands? Are you having to change currency and change, is structures having to change, or can you do it all through that?
It's relatively straightforward. And again, I'm not necessarily involved directly in what the guys are doing day to day. But they will pay it in whatever currency if they are. Most of them have got a New Zealand currency anyway, and or US dollars. But we work through agents in those 9 Pacific islands, so they'll tend to coordinate and handle that for us.
Yeah. And then you've you've got an overarching company. So that was going to be Sea Containers SA, Sea Containers.
Well, initially,
Vic,
yeah.
Then,
So
then
when I
had
started,
to change a little bit.
correct. When I started Sea Containers WA, I always did have this grand vision of one day being national. So very early, I actually secured both the websites and the names, the company names for Sea Containers SA, Sea Containers Vic, Sea Containers NSW, and that was the plan. But then when I went to set up Sea Containers Victoria in 2016, by this time I'd learned a fair bit. It was kind of like, I'm going to have these email handles that are all going to be different. Going to be at SCWO, at SCVic, at SCNSW.
Admin lady for each one.
Exactly, mate. The amount of admin involved, and it's all about one thing I have learned in business too, mate. It's just trying to keep things as simple as possible. Remove the complexity. How do you make it simple? So I polled the team. I'm massive on asking my staff what their thoughts are on any really big decisions.
I like that.
And I put forward a few names and also asked them to put forward some suggestions. We came up with Total Containers. So we called it Total Containers. So effectively Total Containers is our national brand. And WA, we are Sea Containers WA, but we also do have the Total Containers brand in Western Australia as well. But over here, it's an iconic name now, especially within the container industry, to the point where it's quite funny. Kind of 4 or 5 years ago, you could just see everywhere, all our competitors on their websites have all got, if you want to buy a Sea Containers WA, buy from us today, or Sea Containers in WA, they're all using Sea Containers WA in their own
free marketing.
That's what I see it as, mate. There's no point in being upset about it. Okay, actually, yeah, it's actually free marketing,
Yeah.
so I'm happy. They all try and leverage off that because people do search Sea Containers WA.
Yeah.
Because it's just, it's a strong brand.
And so from setting up over here, then expanding NZ, expanding over east, what was the biggest challenge in all of those different, I guess, expansion plans for you?
Finding the right people is the biggest thing. I'm very fortunate. I've got some great people that have supported me along the way. I've employed some great staff. The very first guy I employed is still with me, Brett. Brett has been, his loyalty has been unquestionable. He's my modifications manager, also my business development manager as well. And Brett himself is a very experienced boilermaker, came on board initially repairing and modifying containers for me, at the same time selling. He's actually
multi-talented.
He's got some great strings to his bow actually. Runs his own, in the past he's run his own kayak fishing website and podcasting and written for the Western Angle and he's a clever guy.
Love it.
So Brett's been a great supporter.
And your wife, I imagine.
Em's been awesome.
So she supported the expansion, or was
Definitely,
she saying...
no, definitely. Em has. She's always looked after the family, and she knows that I'm a kind of pretty ambitious kind of guy, and it's also about providing for the family as well, and to have success, and not to limit the growth either, and also to enjoy business along the way is important. So you kind of kick a few goals in WA, and I think having that experience working globally. Kind of, certainly broadens your horizons. And if you've travelled a fair bit, you see what else is going on around the world. WA's small, and if you think small business, there's no reason why you need to. If you're success, and particularly if you're successful in WA, you really should be successful. I think almost anywhere else in the world, especially in if there's a larger population. Yeah.
And why is that? Because to make a successful small business here, it's competitive?
I think so, definitely. I think there's a relatively small market over here and it's quite competitive too. And you see that when you do dabble on the East Coast and you go there, there's a lot more opportunity. Yes, there might be more competitors, but much larger markets. So I think if you can be successful in a small market and do it well, then I think you'll be quite successful in larger markets.
Love it. And what does the future hold? Where do you see yourself in 5-10 years' time?
I actually had a recent offer for somebody to buy this business, but I think there's still some things to be done. It's a strong business. We do have some pretty large competitors in this industry. One of them has just been delisted. They've taken themselves off the ASX, but they're a $200 million turnover business, so there's some big players. But they've knocked on our door a number of times because, and I've been quite complimentary actually. The MD only said to me recently, he came and saw me at the beginning of the year and he said, Kevin, we think that you're our biggest competitor in the West Australian market. You're the guys that we keep hearing about and cause us the most problems. So it's nice to hear that. Means we must be doing something right. Having sold the transport company beginning of last year, I'm relatively comfortable. don't have a lot of debt personally. So I've got options, and I'm fortunate to have options, I suppose. And that's one of the biggest things in life, and I've said this with my 3 children, is that studying and going to school or going to uni, it's actually about giving yourself options. That's what it is. Life's about options. The more options you've got, I think, just it gives you the opportunity to chop and change, or to if you're not happy with what you're doing, you can do something different. So I have options in my life now. I've had to recently step back into the business. The last 4 or 5 years, particularly, I've focused on the growth, strategy, direction, culture, focus on where we're going, what we're doing, the expansion on the East Coast. I set up Victoria in 2016, set up Queensland October 2019. Had to put that into mothballs because with COVID, it's been very difficult to continue the expansion in Queensland. So we've mothballed that just for the time being. But whilst mothballing that, I've also set up Bunbury. So I bought a 5,000 square metre property in Bunbury, yard down there in the industrial area, and have a BDM. So we're doing a lot of work in the southwest. So hence pushing forward regionally, because we had to hold back on our expansion on the East Coast. I'd still like to keep pushing into the East Coast, but also keep pushing regionally as well. I've had to step back into this business. I did have 2 senior guys that were running it for me. They decided to move on beginning of this year for their own personal reasons, go out and compete against me, but good luck to them. And they've chosen the worst time ever because the container supply has just dropped off the cliff, particularly in the last 6 months with what's happening with COVID. And shipping companies all flat out, and there's not enough containers to go around at the moment, so supplies got very tight. So reminiscent of what happened in the GFC.
Can't be jumping on the plane at the moment and just going visiting and building some relationships over in Asia.
Let alone even getting containers. Boxes are selling for a lot more in Asia than they are here, and they've been going up like kind of 2.5 times what they cost me a year ago, what they're costing now. So you need some pretty deep pockets to be involved in this game at the moment. So there's some challenges.
From if you don't mind me asking, the sale of the transport business, what figure was that? You don't have to share it with me or the listeners if
I probably can't, but out of respect for Greg.
Yep.
I can't say.
But it was a sizable figure.
It was a sizable figure for sure.
So I guess
I see. Well, at the time we had 95 staff.
Yep.
So it was a sizable operation.
And so money obviously isn't really a driving factor for you.
No.
You're not doing these businesses for trying to get the next big toy or the next money goal. You are driven by the process, by entrepreneurship. Business is what gets you excited and out of bed.
And I enjoy business. I've been particularly probably the last 15 years particularly, I've been a massive podcast as they've come on stream, but a self-learner. We'll be reading books. Now it's more podcasts because a little bit time poor, so to speak. I'm a cyclist, so I'm quite keen rider. So I enjoy listening to a podcast with one earbud and listen to a podcast and learning along the way. And so an entrepreneur. We've actually dabbled in a few other things along the way that some haven't been so successful. So that's been interesting too. A few lessons learned, a bit of money burnt. But I do enjoy the process of business, and I enjoy actually coaching and mentoring people in general. So I do a lot of that with my staff, but also other business people I generally have an opinion.
Yeah.
And I like to try and help people too, mate. I'm a massive fan of helping people and seeing people do well. So
there's enough to go around, isn't there? So
there is.
It's better to lift people up with you.
I think so, definitely. And sometimes I've learnt a lot of lessons along the way. So if I can help somebody learn those lessons a little bit quicker through me rather than through their own, through time and money, that makes a bloody big difference, especially if you're young. And generally when you start your own business, you haven't got too much money behind you. So if you can kind of, fast pace that, by someone like me, kind of even just having a bit of a conversation
to help with that
makes
growth.
a bit of a difference. Yeah.
So a lot of our listeners to the podcast are your younger people that are interested in events or they're starting a small business. What advice would you give a mid-20-year-old that's about to start their own business in Perth?
Do your share of planning. Seek and ask questions of people that have been in business. Don't be afraid to ask someone. You'll find that a lot of people will help you if you ask the question. Don't give up. If you believe in yourself, don't give up. And don't go and work 8 hours. If you've got, do the 10, 12, 14 hours, work hard, make it happen. And ask yourself, wherever you want to be in 1 year or 3 or 5 years, why can't you be there in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, accelerate the timeline. Go hard, especially if you've got a good idea or you're passionate. And that's probably passion's important, be passionate. I love what I do. I fell into the shipping industry and loved it. Never worked a hard day in my life in my head because I love what I did. Got involved in the container game and love what I do. I'm passionate about sea containers and everything we can do with container porn. I love containers.
So the motivation stays with the passion. But if you're trying to just do something to make money, that's gonna wane over time.
Over time. Yeah, you won't do the hard yards. If you're doing it just for the money, when it gets hard, you'll give up. But if you're passionate and you know you're driven by that, I think that makes a massive difference.
And you're going to do, I guess, people just get caught in, I guess, the fear of failure as well, and not wanting to step outside of a PYG, role sometimes as well. But they have that passion on the side that.
Crabby, that's a massive thing too. I suppose I would say is don't be scared. What have you got to lose effectively? For some, it might be 10 grand, it might be 50 grand, but it might be a career. But there's always, I'm a strong believer that, one door closes, another one opens. So don't be afraid of actually having a crack. You'd much rather have a crack and fail, and I don't consider it to be fail. Okay, fail is the word I've just used, but it's not failure.
Learning.
It's learning, 100%, mate, that's the right word, it's learnings. It's have a crack, definitely. Don't look back and go, I wish I had because who knows what's around the corner. And I do reference my brother, he passed away at a young age. So you don't know what's around the corner. So have a crack.
Might as well enjoy something that you're passionate about and know that you've given it a go rather than maybe being in something that's safe but isn't stimulating you and getting you excited.
With my children, I've said the same thing to them. If you don't like what you're doing, change. Really, the only person that can change is you. So don't sit there and say, complain about this and I wish I was that, okay, what are you doing about it? Go to TAFE part-time for 3 years and become a chef. Whatever else you need to do it. What are you doing with your spare time? Watching TV, watching Netflix. Put time and effort into becoming a different person to being the person you want to be. We're only here for a short time in reality. Put time and effort into being what you want to be. If you're going to, choose it, go hard. Make it happen. Make shit happen. We put it up on our wall here. Get things done, make shit happen. That's it.
Don't think, do.
Yeah,
Don't
100%.
talk about it. Yeah.
Right, definitely. Yeah. Yep, if you're going to do it, do it.
I love it, Coops. Yeah. It's been a really interesting chat. Congratulations on, your, I guess, being able to be agile and adapt to, changing markets and the sale of the transport business and how well I know the Sea Containers brand is around WA. And being able to expand, and who knows, we might see you in Europe and expanding throughout in the future. Maybe post COVID, we'll have to check in on you in a few years' time.
That might be up to the boss because she's quite keen to do a bit of travel. And, I don't know.
We need another work trip just to be able to go over to Europe. Just to your accountant's not watching or listening to this, so it's okay.
We'll see where it goes.
Coops, pleasure having you on the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Crappy. Appreciate it, mate.